Hi, my name is Julie Moucham, and I am here on behalf of Quality Sewing and Vacuum, and I work at the Everett store. We're really pleased to have you join us today. The class for today will be learn more about your computerized Baby Lock and Brother sewing machine. There's some really beautiful features about this machine, some additional accessories, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take the presser foot off and start with doing a buttonhole. I'll open up the accessory case, put the J foot in, and pull out my buttonhole foot. I have a button here, so when you have the foot, you have the A in front of you. You're going to slide open the back, put the button in, and put it on the machine. So here's your little bar right here, and you're going to slide that in sort of underneath and behind your presser foot. You can lower your presser foot lever here, and it didn't snap right on, so sometimes you need to encourage it by pressing this lever in the back again. When I go to the buttonhole menu, I'm going to, which would be, so on my file tabs here, here's my utility stitches, here's my slide bar to go through those stitches. So the next menu down are edge joining and some heirloom type stitches. The following menu is the buttonholes, and I'll go over these other two menus in a few minutes. So select buttonhole stitch 4-07. Now it tells you at the top of your screen to use presser foot A, and so I am kind of ready to put my fabric underneath the foot. I have a piece of tearaway stabilizer and fabric folded over. I do recommend usually using tearaway because it helps your, gives you the best formation for your buttonholes, but you want to place your fabric in a way so that, because your buttonhole is going to stitch out backwards like so, you need to have plenty of fabric underneath the foot to prepare for that. I'll put the presser foot down, and you can see my button is still red. I have forgotten to do something, but how do I know what it is? If I touch the button, it's dummy proof, especially for me. Right here it says pull down your buttonhole lever. So when I turn the machine to the side, you can see I have a lever right here that comes down, and you want to place this lever behind this first prong. So that is the piece of the buttonhole making part of your machine that's going to tell it it's time to turn around and do the other side of your buttonhole. I'm going to put my speed up. I'm going to touch the green button now that I have pulled the lever down. The button has turned to green, and I'm going to go ahead and start my buttonhole and let it stitch the buttonhole out all by itself, and it will stop and do a tie-off, cut the thread when it's finished. Button here, cut the thread there. Okay, I'm going to put the presser foot up, which when that happens, you will see that the buttonhole will snap back, and it's ready to start the next buttonhole again. So it's really quite amazing. They do a beautiful job on the buttonholes. I'm going to now take the foot up. I'm going to put the lever up, push the lever in the back to let go of the foot, open up the back of the foot, take the button out, close the foot, and put it back in its home in the accessory case. I'm going to pull out the end foot for a lot of the work that we're doing today, and I'm going to set that aside. As we're going along, I would highly encourage you to have your machine in front of you and to pause whenever you've learned something that you would like to practice. The next thing I'm going to demonstrate is the Move It foot. Now, not all of your electronic Brother and Baby Lock machines come with this foot, but some do in the higher up chain of machines. It is a fabulous foot, and to get this foot on, you do need to loosen your screw back here. It is a thumb screw, but for those of us who don't have a lot of hand strength, you'll want a screwdriver. This machine is really nice because it is high shank, so it's easier to get your hands in here. I'm going to come in from the back, like so. Place that bracket around my needle bar. Now there's something in the back of the machine I need to do as well. And you will see on the back of the machine and on the back of the foot, there's a plug and an outlet. It goes in like so. So this actual foot is programmable, and it is a walking foot attachment. The way it works is it compresses your fabric tighter against your feed dogs here. The way the Move It foot works is there's a belt here. It grips the fabric and moves it along. It is fabulous. And so I really like the results I get when I work with this foot. Now, there are a number of different feet that come in the kit for the Innovus BQ 2450. And again, it may differ on your machine, but of these feet, this would be your standard foot. It has just a standard zigzag opening with some red marks on it. This would be your open toe foot because there's no closure there. And this is your stitch in the ditch foot. You can see that blade there, and it's designed to run in the ditch of your quilt and place your stitch in the ditch right in its proper place. I'm going to put this foot on again. So I don't have a bar on these feet, I have little pins here. And that's what the actual foot grips onto. So I lift that up into place. And unlike the walking foot attachment, this foot makes no sound. It's very quiet. But also notice that a lot of my stitches are now grayed out. So when I go to my utility stitches, I can use any of those. When I go to the next menu, I can use any of those. When I go to this menu, it could do one design. If I go to decorative stitch menu, they're all grayed out. So this foot is designed for utility stitching, not decorative work. And when I put my fabric underneath my foot, press your foot down, and green for go. So you can see how well it does, and it makes no sound. All right, so that gives you an idea of how that foot works. I'm now going to take the foot off. If you would like to pause right now, if you have one of these feet and or your walking foot attachment, it is a great opportunity to put that on and off your machine and practice it. I'll set that foot aside and we're going to put the ankle back on. In our Learn to Use Your Computerized Sewing Machine class, we went over these buttons and we're going to do a quick review. This is your start-stop button. It's red now. When I put the foot down, it's green. Now, on some of your other machines, this button may not change color, but it may also work the same way. You need to unplug your foot control to see if this button will work for you and make your machine run. This is your reverse button, tie off in place button, needle up down button. So if you stop and your needle's in the fabric, if you touch this button, it brings it up. If your needle is up and you want your needle in the fabric, this button puts it in. Thread cutter, presser foot lever. So with the presser foot in the down position, I can manually use my presser foot lever. When I can also use this button so I don't have to reach all the way back there, and this will put it up and down as well. This is the needle threader. I do want you to notice on this machine, when I put the presser foot up and down, look here at this area where your take-up lever is. When I put it up, it opens that space up. So if you're trying to thread your machine and this is blocked, it's because you need to put your presser foot up in order to open up your tensions. And it is always best to thread with your tensions open, and then when you are ready to start stitching, you're going to put your presser foot down to engage your tension. You have to have tension on your machine on both of your threads, top and bobbin, in order to have a successful stitch. So you can see, as I was talking in the Learn to Use Your Computerized Sewing Machine class, there were oval shapes at the top of these straight stitches. There are not, but I'm just going to deselect, touch the stitch to get the blue out of there. You can see in this rectangular shape of all 4 of these boxes, stitches 1 through 4. These stitches are off to the side. Again, that represents your left needle position. And these stitches are in the middle of the box, which represents your center needle position. Here is your tie-off icons here. When I touch the scissor button, it will highlight both the scissor and the reverse button. When I touch this button, it activates my AHA sewing feature. So now when I sew, it starts with 3 stitches forwards, 3 stitches backwards. When I pause stitching, it puts the needle in the fabric, the foot senses what's underneath it, and lifts itself up. What is not to love about that? And I tell the machine I'm finished stitching by touching my reverse button. It does 3 stitches backwards, 3 stitches forwards, cuts the thread, brings the needle up, and lifts the presser foot, so I can simply pull my fabric free. So as I was saying, we have some other menus. I covered these first 3. Underneath the buttonhole menu is a really fantastic feature on this machine. Some machines have it, not all electronic machines do, but the more advanced ones would. So when I touch this menu, you can see a straight stitch going in 8 different directions. And you can see at the bottom row a zigzag stitch going in 4 different directions. I have drawn out myself a little box with 1 diagonal line in it, and I am going to turn my tie-offs off so I don't have to do that, but I do want my pivoting AHA function on. I'm going to lower my presser foot. I'm going to choose my stitching off to the right. So see that arrow pointing to the right? It's going to sew from left to right. So I'm going to select that, touch green for go. It helps to have lines drawn to follow, but it's not necessary. So I've sewn to the right. Now I want to sew forward. So I'll push this button, come forward. And next I'll sew up diagonally to the point that I started at. And the point is not to have perfect straight lines. The point of this exercise is to learn how the feature works. So we're going to sew forward now, and now off to the left again. Isn't this fabulous? So think of the times you've sewn on patches and been very frustrated about trying to get into a very tight space. This function affords you the opportunity to sew around those edges without having to move your fabric. Last but not least, we're going to touch the Q menu. Q stands for quilt, and this is your whole quilt menu. So do you see the letters, the stitches that have the P on them? And then we have one that has a Q and some other utility stitches such as blanket stitches. This Q-12 is designed for if you want to do hand applique look blanket stitch. When I touch Q-01, you can see the needle is in the middle. When I touch Q-02, it moves it to the right, and it's actually telling you to use the J presser foot. So when you're using your J foot, it will move the needle to the right position to get 1/4 of an inch to the right hand edge of your presser foot. And then this one, when you do Q-01, you can see the line is in the middle. So that's your best position for using your 1/4 inch piecing foot, which the machine does come with. And one of the biggest reasons people buy sewing machines is so they can piece their quilts. So it's really nice that it's got that feature. I'm going to let go of this presser foot. Actually, I also want to cover this. This, if you don't know what it is a knee lift. And what this does is it goes into this hole on your machine. And with the presser foot down, the job that this knee lift does is it lifts your presser foot for you. Do you see that? So if I were sewing away, if I wanted my hands fully on the fabric, I could do this with my knee and pick the presser foot right up. However, when you have the AHA feature, which again is the profile of your presser foot that's coming slightly up, and your needle in the fabric, you don't need a knee lift. I have a knee lift for most of my machines. I never use it because I have this AHA feature. All right, so let's talk a little bit about decorative stitches. So in this blue area, we have utility stitches. When I go to character decorative stitch, right here, OK to delete the selected pattern, we'll touch OK. And now it turns into a peach color background, which means that we are in our decorative stitch menu. I am going to go to menu number 7. I'm going to scroll down a little bit so you can kind of see some of the stitches that are available to you. I am going to choose a scallop stitch. And then I'm going to choose another scallop stitch. So when you are in your decorative stitching menu, you have these icons at the bottom for editing your stitches. I'm going to choose another scallop stitch. We're going to do this feathery one, but we're going to mirror image it. So you have 2 scallops there. When I touch the 3 stars, now I can see what a row of that stitching looks like. Do I like it? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. If I go up it further into my stitches, you can see that some of these stitches start off on one side, whereas some of the other stitches start more in the middle. If I delete both of these and I touch this chicken scratch stitch and another feather stitch, you can see they blend fairly well because they start at the same point. Whereas if I were to add this stitch that starts in the middle, it doesn't look so good. But you can also add other stitches if you would like. So let's say we want 3 more of this stitch, and now to do 3 stars to show me what the whole stitch would look like, I can see whether or not that's a stitch that I like. These stitches, if you look at the foot, it tells you to use your N decorative stitching foot. And the reason for that is, again, because the foot has a channel out of the bottom of it, and it will accommodate the buildup of your decorative stitches. So you can see that all these stitches stay within the parameters of the 7mm opening of the presser foot. When I go back to character decorative stitch, I'm going to say OK to delete the selected pattern. If I go to menu 6, I have 21 pages of stitches. In addition to that, as I scroll through my stitches, you can now see that this stitch is wider than the foot. So the same feature that we used to sew this directional feed box, the feed dogs are going to move the fabric in those 8 different directions to form that decorative stitch. I really like these snowflake stitches, so I'm going to delete this stitch. I'm going to choose one of these snowflakes here, and you can see what that looks like. And then when I touch the next stitch, it adds that in. So you can see that this snowflake is larger than this snowflake. This snowflake stitch will stay within the 7mm parameter of the presser foot, and this stitch is going to do a multi-directional feed. When I go to 3 stars, you can now see what that stitch will look like. Let's take an opportunity here to create some decorative stitches and have some fun sewing them out. So this is the second snowflake, which is stitching out larger and going sideways and diagonal. And now it's going to go to this little snowflake. So you can see that the little snowflake moves to the top. Whatever the machine is stitching out, it will be at the top of the display. Okay. And I'm going to do a tie-off in place. I do not have my tie-off selected here, so it won't cut the thread, but it did finish the stitch. I'm pressing the scissor button and the foot will lift. So isn't that a fabulous stitch? And with the holidays coming, think of the many opportunities in which you can use that stitch. Also consider doing multiple rows of decorative stitching to create your own fabric. That's a lot of fun. All right, last thing I want to show you is how to do free motion quilting. Now, we don't want this stitch to be the stitch we do we? So we're gonna go back to utility stitch, touch OK. And you can see I've already have that icon selected, which means that the machine has already dropped my feed dogs for me. I just now need to put on my free motion foot. So when your feed dogs are up, the only direction your fabric can move, generally speaking, is forwards and backwards. Even with the multi-directional feed, it would be hard to do a straight stitch in a circle. So the beauty of doing free motion work is you can move in any direction you want. However, you have to drop the feed dogs in order to make that happen. Take the ankle off. We'll put this foot on again. So this bracket is going to come in from behind, go around the screw bar, and you're going to tighten that down. I would also recommend always screwdriver tightening. And there we go. I have a quilt sandwich made up. This beautiful blue fabric is going to be the back. And we have here the backing, the batting, and a topper. So for doing stippling, think of it a little bit as like doing doodling. And think of puzzle pieces. I'll put the presser foot down because you can see the button is red. And you might decide that you prefer having your presser foot attached for this process because there's a combination of the speed at which you stitch and move the fabric as well. So I am now ready to start. Generally speaking, when you do free motion work, you can have a little bit longer thread tail out. You're gonna put the needle down and you're gonna bring it back up. You're gonna pull up your thread, and that just has a little tiny thread tail because of the thread cutter. And then you're gonna hold both those thread tails out. Have your needle go up and down in the same hole a few times. Okay, and then you can come in and snip your threads. It's easier, a little bit nicer to put your presser foot up in order to make that happen. Presser foot back down, green for go. So if you go 1, 2, 3, and then change directions, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and just continue filling that in. If you speed your machine up, you actually, the longer you do this, the better you get. However, it is still an acquired skill, so I might free motion this month and then not do it for 6 months. So then you have to kind of get comfortable with that process again. I can speed up my speed control here, touch the go, and now what happens is I need to move my fabric faster, right? So as you get better, and that's why sometimes it's nicer to have your foot control in so you can actually control your speed with that instead of this feature. I do want to go back and show you a little bit about the settings that you have on this special machine. So if we look down at the bottom of our screen, first of all, there's a question mark, which is your help menu, believe it or not. And when we touch that, we can look at operation guide, sewing guide, and pattern explanation. So going back to the buttonhole, when I touch sewing guide, it shows me a garment. I have a skirt here, which shows me I can do a blind hem stitch. And that's one thing I never remember how to do. I do it so seldom, but if that's a stitch you want to do, if you touch this icon, you're going to have a refreshment video, or not video, but tutorial on how to do that. If I touch buttonhole, it's telling me these are the buttonholes available to me, and down under here explains what those buttonholes are designed for. So stretch 4-09, this one with the zigzaggy stitch, is designed for stretch fabric. It says so right here. 4-12, a keyhole buttonhole, is designed for suits and an overcoat. So when I go to thinner medium fabric, 4-07, I'll touch the buttonhole. Now it takes me through step by step, and you can see I am on page 1 of 13, showing me how to do the buttonhole. So you can play this video over and over again as many times as you want, or you can consult the actual screen of your machine. It's very user-friendly to work with, and you're going to love this feature. I highly recommend you pause right now and go through your help menu. There's many topics available. So if I touch close, you cannot sew from any of these help menu screens, so you do have to close it out all the way. But you can see I can learn how to do all these different things, zipper insertion, right here on the screen of my machine. When I touch close, I can also go to operation guide. When I go to there, if we touch basic operation, there is a menu for threading your machine, and page 1 of 9 takes you through step by step. You'll also notice that at the top of the screen, a video camera shows up. So when I touch that, I now have an onboard video to watch. Is that amazing? Who knew? Our grandmas would be amazed, wouldn't they? I'm gonna touch close and close. By the way, there's no talking on those built-in videos because it has to work in every language, which now brings me to the settings menu on the screen. So if your sewing machine has a sheet of paper that has lines on it, it might have a little bit of a check mark as well. You want to touch that. That's going to open up your settings menu. You can see the top here, it's talking about width control, and it shows you a picture of this button. If I were doing zigzag stitching, I could turn that on and use this for my stitch width. Below that we have find, adjust vertical, and find, adjust horizontal. I highly recommend just leaving these alone. They are factory set. So that's one thing I never mess with. We have below that presser foot height. We know that the number is in the black background. so therefore it is a default setting. Foot pressure is at 3, and dual feet adjustment is at 0. This is where you can adjust the setting on your Move It foot when you have it plugged in. Scrolling to page 2, initial position. Do you want your machine to be in the left needle position or the center needle position whenever you turn it on? So you could have it in center if that's your preference. The next line would be initial stitch page. So you can see here that's your utility stitches. And if you're a quilter and you always want it to default to your quilting menu, you can do that. By the way, the stitch length for the straight stitch in your quilting menu is default setting of 2.0, whereas on this menu it's going to be 2.5. This has to do with the multifunction foot control. That would be an additional foot control that you would purchase for the machine, and that is programmable. We have pivoting height, free motion height. So let's say you're doing a real puffy quilt, you might want to make your free motion pivoting height a little bit higher. These next two rows are really important. And if you have these in your settings menu, I highly recommend that you turn them on. So automatic fabric sensor system and reinforcement priority. So that really helps when you're going over denim or thick fabrics. When you pause with your AHA feature where the needle is in the fabric and the foot comes up, it's always sensing the fabric and lifting it up higher than what that surface is. Needle position up, down. So now we are back to, no, we're not, sorry. We have needle position up, down. I highly recommend keeping it down. That's my preference. You can have it be whatever you want it to be. The next row down is when your needle stops, where do you want it to be? If it's going to be in the up position. Do you want it to be well above the fabric, close to the fabric, or in the fabric? So you can customize that setting. The nice thing is if you did the one with just above the fabric, just barely come above the fabric, so when you put the next row of fabric in, it would be close to your fabric. Upper and bobbin thread sensor, that automatically is on. I would highly recommend you keep it on. However, let's say you're doing not stitching but puncturing a piece of paper for a card. You wouldn't want thread in your needle, and therefore you could turn it off. We also have our volume. So as I've been touching the screen, you can hear it beep. So that would be the volume for that. Scroll to next mode. We have echo mode, shut off, support mode, where you can turn, those are turned off now. You can customize those settings for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40, or back to being off. Opening screen. If I touch this toggle, it would be the utility menu or opening, so sewing or utility. Opening screen is going to give you the first screen. So if you go to sewing screen, that's one less screen you will have to toggle through. And then English. Under here you have the choice of many languages. And if you accidentally go to the wrong language and you can't figure out where to go, look for your globe. That's the proper icon for choosing your language. We'll touch close here. We have screen 6. This is our light display. So we turn this down a little bit for videoing. I can make it even brighter. 5 is the default. And screen brightness itself here. This screen has to do with the software version of your machine. So version 1, we're at 4.01, and version 2, we're at 4.0. There's an upgrade kit available for this machine that you can purchase from your dealer, and you can give them a call to find out, or call our online website number. This is your service count, your total count. This number here happens to be your machine number. So we'll close that out. This icon at the top, when I touch that, nothing works. No response at all. Don't panic. So you just simply come up to see if your lock is highlighted. When we deselect the lock, now the screen will respond. Okay, last but not least, down here at the bottom, oh, I know one more thing I want to do after I show you these. This is your stitch width. So you can see my zigzag getting wider, and this is my stitch length. So when I touch minus stitch length, you can see it turns into a heavy satin stitch. And when I spread it out, they get the zigs and the zags get further apart, don't they? These are utility overlock type stitches. I'm going to take it out of free motion mode. There we go. And then left-right shift. So depending on the stitch, this stitch right now is 5 millimeters. Let's go to the zigzag stitch. We're at a width of 3.5. If there's a number here, you can move right and left where the stitch will start. The higher up you go in machines, the more choices you have as far as that's concerned. And your automatic tension is here. So you can, if we're doing decorative work, I tend to set my tension a little bit lower. And let's just see when we choose a decorative stitch, it goes 3.6. A lot of times I like to put mine to about 2.4 or 6 would be fine. And that way, if you're using really beautiful decorative top thread, you wouldn't have to carry a matching bobbin thread in your bobbin. You would, by loosening this top tension, then your bobbin thread is going to carry that and pull that pretty top thread to the bottom, and you're going to get a nicer looking decorative stitch. Free motion here, this is pattern begin. So if we start doing a decorative stitch and we need to go back to the beginning of the stitch because your thread may have broken, that icon will put it back. Delete will take off what you have on your screen. Let's say I create a new feather stitch and I'm going to touch this one about 3 times, and I'm going to touch this one about 3 times, and then I want to see what a row of that looks like. Ugh. So that's not so pretty, because remember I was talking about where you want to pay attention to where the stitch starts, right? So this would be a better choice. So that gives you 3. And then you can add more of these in. And that shows you what it will look like. But you could always stitch it out, but if you know you really love it, you're going to use it a lot, and maybe you want to come back to it in the future, you could save it by touching your memory pocket here and save it to your machine hard drive or USB, or even send it back to your computer if you have your cable attached. Touch that and it is saved. When I then, let's say I'm going to touch a different stitch now that I have it saved. No, it's not restealing. Let me delete this. And let's say I want to find that stitch again. I believe I'm going to touch this, and then I have to recall it. See the pocket here? Here's your pocket memory with a blue arrow pointing to the right. That is pulling out what you have saved in your memory. So when I touch that, it'll show me numerous icons of the different stitches that I have saved there, and you can choose those. So if you're doing a specific applique project, let's say, where you are working with a blanket stitch and you have it very specifically set, by saving it to your memory, you could go back here to retrieve it and get right back to the exact settings of that stitch. That concludes Learn to Use more about your electronic sewing machine, brother and baby lock. I hope you've learned a lot. Please stop and play with all your other different menus. I do want to point out that we do have an alphabet saved here in your Decorative Stitches, and again, that's the Character Decorative Stitch tab at the top. We open up to 4 fonts and an additional one. When we choose that menu, you can now program in your name. Don't confuse J for L. I always have to do that for Julie. J, and when you're doing a cursive font, it never looks well to do it all in caps. It really pays to switch to lowercase, which would be done over here on the side. Otherwise, it looks just like a bunch of monograms. And you can see that's my name programmed out. I'm going to put this on real quick. I want you to be able to see how this stitches out. And again, it's telling me to use the end presser foot. I could also add a space and add my last name, or maybe just my last initial. So go back to uppercase, excuse me. And then if I needed to do a house number, date of birth, something like that, I could go to the numbers here. So there's many options in this menu. What you'll find quite surprising is you may expect this to stitch out this way, when in fact it's going to stitch out this way on its side. So when you go to do this, leave yourself some room, and again, always have a tearaway stabilizer behind this, because this is considered a decorative stitch, and those always turn out better when you have a stabilizer behind your stitching. You would probably want to draw yourself a line. I'll see how I do today. And again, I wanted to point out that these alphabets sew out using the 8-way directional feed dog system. So you can draw a line, but you won't be able to keep your foot directly on it, because it's also going to be moving a little diagonal and as well as sideways. So sometimes it's best to have 2 lines on each side here, and then make sure the side of your presser foot stays parallel to it as it's stitching. So you can see the M is at the top. When it's finished with the M, it will stop. I don't have my thread cutter activated here, so I can simply touch my thread cutting button here. Isn't that beautiful? It's quite legible. There are some jump stitches involved, and you would want to come in and just clean those up in between your letters. I recommend leaving them on the back so that they can't come undone, but it looks a little bit cleaner on the front side. And I didn't stir my fabric quite well, very straight, so if I hold it crooked, it looks straight. And sometimes they do a funny start to the letter. It just depends too. With an angular slanted font, you're going to have more jump stitches probably than you will on a straight up and down font. Okay? So you can see you have just a straight line font. We have the cursive font, or more of a calligraphy type font, and then an outline alphabet. But you can all still do upper and lower case for that. So I hope you've enjoyed yourself. Please take advantage of writing out some of your name, people that you love, maybe things that you love, your pet's name. There's so many things that you can do. You can fill up an entire piece of fabric with just writing and create your own fabric that way. Thanks so much for joining me today. I have really enjoyed our time together. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at qualitysewing.com or come into any of our stores.